Feel so hard. Summer rhythms flame. We're gonna fly. Go, go, go. Oh, shine it all out. In the summer sun. We're a summer loving crowd. Talking Brazil ball. We're breaking it down. Bringing the passion.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Talking Brazil Ball, the podcast all about Brazilian football. And we're here to preview the 2025 Serie A season once more as the countdown continues to the big kickoff at the end of March. I'm your host, James Brook, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host, George. George, we're here to count down. The countdown is ticking along right towards the big time, isn't it? How are you doing?
Yeah, well, like always, James, you can't stop time, can you? It always ticks by, and another week gone. It's I'm okay, thank you very much. And come over to you. How are you?
Yeah, all good. Like it was last week, the weather's slowly getting lighter here. I'm sitting here looking out, and it's still nice and bright, so that's always a good sign. We are a little earlier today than usual, actually, but it's still, nice and bright outside, which makes a change. Still a bit chilly. But yeah, I'm all right. We took in some live football, didn't we, last week? Wasn't quite Serie A standard, was it, though?
Absolutely not, James. I think that was before the last pod, actually. We didn't actually say that on the last one. But yeah, we did last week, early doors last week, local side, of course. Like I said, not quite the Serie A standard, Brazilian standard. Hopefully one day we will be able to get to one of them, Brazilian game. I'm sure the standard would be absolutely excellent. But yeah, it's another week to go, another week down. It's another week ticked off after this one. There's one left to do, James, isn't there, in terms of previews. We've got 4 more teams to go today, and then the final 4 next week. And then it's a break for us, isn't it, for a week? And then the season starts, James. So, yeah, it's come around again,
Yeah, very true. So 8 teams to go. We've done 12. If you want to hear about any of the first 12 teams, alphabetical order we're doing them in. If you want to hear about any of those, if you go back and listen to the previous shows, we cover every single team in more or less detail. We give a bit of an overview and into how they're getting on heading into the season. And if you go a bit further back, we do a few more previous shows on the title challengers and the relegation, or the newly promoted sides too. So if you want to get stuck into the Brazilian Serie A previews before the season gets underway, then you dig into that. There'll be a few hours worth of the action for you, and once you've come out of that, you should know all about. You should be all ready for the new season. Like I say, George, 4 more teams today. So do you want to kick off with your quiz? Have you got a little quiz today? So the 4 teams we're looking at are Juventude, Mirassol, Palmeiras, and Santos. So have you got a quiz?
Yeah, of course, James. It's tradition now that I have a quiz, and I do have one. Like you said, you mentioned the 4 teams. We've actually looked already briefly at 3 of these 4 sides already in the various different previews you mentioned before we started looking at the individual teams one by one. So we have already looked at 3 teams, Mirassol, Santos, and Palmeiras. The only one we haven't looked at so far is Juventude. But I do have a quiz. It surrounds Palmeiras. So I'm thinking the green and white teams today, aren't I, James, as we discussed last week? And the quiz is this, and it surrounds Abel Ferreira, of course, the outspoken Portuguese manager of Palmeiras. And it's a 2-pronged question. So the first question to you is, James, Abel Ferreira took over at Palmeiras in November 2020, but who was the team that he left to join Palmeiras in the winter of 2020?
Oh, it's a good question.
It's a European side.
Yeah, I think he was in Brazil. I think he was in Portugal, wasn't he? So Braga, they tend to seem to come from Braga. I know it wasn't one of the big 3 in Portugal. So no, Vitória Guimarães.
No, you're completely off track, actually, James. I'm sorry to say. It was a Greek side, actually, he came from.
Wow.
PAOK.
Thessalonica.
Yeah, Thessalonica. He finished second with them in the Greek league before moving to Palmeiras in the winter of 2020. So that's the first part of the question, James. The second part is surrounding Palmeiras managers of the past, if you like. Abel Ferreira is the first. He is the one and only European manager that Palmeiras has ever had. Obviously, he's Portuguese. But what I want to know, James, and this is, I mean, you're never going to get it really, I wouldn't have said, but for some reason you might do, but it's a bit of knowledge for you. Who was the last non-Brazilian manager to manage Palmeiras?
I don't know.
You can have a guess, can't you, I suppose?
Non-Brazilian.
He was Argentinian, so, you could...
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any Argentinian coaches off the top of my head, really, that are worth for damn.
I'll give you one.
Really.
I'll give you one, Marcelo Bielsa.
I said, that are worth a damn,
Oh, well. Well, there you go.
From what you were talking about him in those final days, I think you'd probably
yeah, but we were getting pumped, weren't we? Left, right, and centre. But yeah, it's a man called Richard Garrica, who he is manager of the Chilean national side actually, and he managed Palmeiras he only was there a few months. Between the months of May 2014 and August 2014. So he barely really was there for a long period at all, but he was the last non-Brazilian manager they've had since Abel Ferreira took over. Like I said, he is the first and he's the first European manager they've ever had in the history. So, and he's doing a fine job, to be fair. Although we'll speak about Palmeiras later, of course, in the show here today.
Yeah, very good. They don't tend to get the many European managers, as we well know. So it is good that there's one flying the flag for the old continent, doing pretty well there at the minute. Although, yeah, like you said, we'll see how they're getting on. You've got your green kind of top on there, haven't you, as a tribute. Victor Roque there.
Yeah.
Anyway, George, that was a good quiz. Well done. Let's get into it. But before we do of course have a new offering from the Talking Brazil Ball band, and I have to say this is a really good effort. This is a great tune that they've come up with this time. So sit back and listen to the Talking Brazil Ball band once more.
Juventude, Mirassol, Palmeries, the palm trees.
Santos. Let's see how they get on the season in Serie A.
Yeah, that was I mean, it does go on that. I listened to the whole thing.
Again, it's a 4-minute music. It's a 4-minute song, James. So again, nobody has reached out to us and asked for any of the full versions of these songs. But again, if you want to have it, then I'll we'll happily send it to you if you want it, to listen to, all the time if you want. So it's a great song. And yeah, of course, it outlines as you did beforehand, James. The clubs that we're looking at today, and there's one last song of the previews which will come next week, and we'll reveal them. Obviously, if you know your alphabetical Brazilian teams, you'll know who's coming. But we will reveal that at the end of the show, won't we, James? So
yeah, it's not much of a revelation. I don't think it's just saying what's coming next, isn't it? But a good hit, and I'm surprised nobody's reached out to listen to them all. But maybe we can have a big medley of them all at the end. We'll see. But anyway, George, let's crack on. Enough waffling. Let's get into these four teams. So like you said, the only club that we haven't covered in any kind of detail just yet of these four is Juventude. So obviously a good season last time out. We thought they'd stay up. They did stay up. They obviously lost the manager halfway through the season, who went on to Inter, Supermercado. And they then got Juventude, didn't they? And I think he was sacked shortly before the end of the season. They did go on a massive bad run at the end, didn't they? And they just managed to kind of stay up with a couple of good results towards the back end of the season. So how have they been getting on early on, regional competitions, and how are they shaping up ahead of the new year?
Yeah, it's kind of been quite decent, really, in the sort of the Gaucho, isn't it? They play in, James, and
yeah,
I think they've only lost 3 games. Sorry, they've only lost 2 games in the Gaucho, and both the teams you probably expect in Gremio and Internacional. So they're they're going quite well. I think the manager, like you said, they went through, but Fabio Matias, who we did speak about when he first came in, he got a really good result when he first came in. And I think they might do okay, not okay, but I think they'll be staying up again. I think Fabio Matias, he's a well-versed coach in the Brazilian football, in Serie A. He knows what he's doing, and he kind of steered them to safety, really. And there were only 3 points above the relegation zone in the end. But like you said, they went on a tremendously bad run towards the end. They picked up a little bit in the last sort of 4 or 5 games and managed to just pull themselves out of the mire a little bit. And I think that is in no small part to Mr. Matias, because I think he was definitely played a big part in them staying up. And if you look at the business, James, I'm not sure exactly where they came in the Gaucho, but they didn't do too badly. Like I said, they only lost the 2 games in the whole little tournament. So, but if you look at the transfers in the business that they've done, they're all very there's none players that really stand out here, to be quite honest. And they've brought in, I think there's about 11 players. Yeah, they brought in about 15 players here, and you can't look at any of them and say, "Hey, I know him, and I think he'll do a good job." I think it's just looks like they've shopped a lot at the lower divisions in Brazil, especially. There's players coming in from Gio and Criciúma, and there's one actually that you might say who might catch the eye if you're going to pick one of them. Is Colombian international, 1 cap for Colombia, Mr. Daniel Giraldo, and he signed from Colombian side Milon Arios, and he got a cap for Colombia in 2022. He's now 32 years old. He's a centre midfield player, so maybe he might still up the midfield. But other than that, James, you're looking through it and you're thinking, yeah, I'm not really sure of any of these players, but they all could be gems. They haven't really lost many in terms of players going out. There's Ronaldo who's gone to Inter, but other than that, you'd say actually, yeah, they're looking pretty much okay, probably, for going forward. Under Matias, I think they're okay.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that they've managed to keep most of the players. I think the one that is the biggest loss for them is a player who wasn't even their player, was it? It was Lucas Barbosa, who was the top scorer last year, who's was always going to leave, really. Was at Santos, been on a lot of loans, and he's joined RBB. So he's obviously a big loss. They're going to have to replace his goals somehow. I mean, he was top scorer, only 7 goals, which isn't, obviously really particularly prolific, but they're going to have to find that from somewhere. So I think that's the big thing for them. You talk about Giraldo, he's a midfielder, isn't he? So, it remains to be seen. I think that's the one thing that could really hold them back. And like you said, Matias has had a good start from the limited time he's had there. They actually got to the semi-final in the Gaucho, so they lost to Gremio in the final, which is, obviously the big club Gremio had won the last, I don't know, I spoke about last time, I think they won the last 7 or 8, Gremio, the Gaucho, so Inter actually beat them in the first leg of the final, incidentally. 2-0, so they've got one hand on that trophy. But yeah, no disgrace losing to Grêmio. The one poor result I've spotted that they have is that they've already gone out of the Copa do Brazil in the first round against Moringa FC, who are obviously not, they're a Serie C side actually. So that's a really poor result. That's going to put the pressure on him, you'd imagine. I know there's been already one club that we're going to look at later on has already sacked the manager owing to pre-season results. So, we know it can be volatile. That's a really poor result for them, isn't it? So maybe he's going to be under pressure. Who do they start the season against, George? And yeah, how do you see them going up? What's your prediction for Juventude?
Well, I'll see, James, in just a second who they're coming up against in the first few games. But I think they will stay up again. But I do think they'll be struggling slightly. I think they'll be on the verge of they'll be flirting with relegation, I think, again. Like I said, Matias, I think, will keep them up. But I don't know whether really they're going to challenge any higher up the division, to be quite honest. They actually have quite a kind opening game against Vitória at home. But then they do it gets a little bit trickier. Botafogo away is the first away game, the second league game of the season. In the first 6 games, they are playing Flamengo away, Inter away, and Fogo away. The other 3 games are Vitória at home, Ceará at home, and Mirassol at home. So the home games are winnable, you've got to say, but the away games, they couldn't get any harder, really, to be quite honest.
Yeah, gonna be tough now. I mean, last season, as we saw, they started pretty well and then they tailed off. So maybe they'll have a bit more of a steady kind of campaign. Let's see how they do. But certainly, I think the big question for Juventude is going to be the goals. How do they replace that from Lucas Barbosa? And can they replace that, really? Okay, George, a prediction then. If you've got the table up here, you've got a lot of the bottom half places still open to fill. So for anybody who's not been listening, George has been steadily filling in his predicted full table of the Brasileirão for 2025. Where are you going with Juve?
Like I said, James, I think Juve, they will miss Barbosa. They have, it's no doubt. It'll be interesting to see how he does at Bragantino as well. But I'm going to go with 7 teams, James. Like I said, I think they'll just scrape it and stay up. I don't think it'll be. There might be a little bit higher during the season, but I don't see them coming. They'll be flirting with relegation. I do think they'll just stave it off again.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know at this stage what kind of what expectation they will have, really. I guess in a way you'd say that's a good season to stay up, but then again, at some point you have to start looking to a bit bigger plans, don't you? But I think at this point they'd take it.
Yeah, I think staying up, because look, they came up, didn't they? Straight up after they came down in 2022. And they came straight back up in 23 and came 15th last season. From a team, a supporter of the side going for promotion, James, at this current time, you'd have to say that a second season in the top flight, you'd be happy by staying up, wouldn't you, really? If you stayed up in a comfortable-ish, not really, but you've managed to stay up the first season, you're looking to do it again, maybe slightly better your final position, but you're not looking at anything more than staying up for me.
Yeah, probably. So, yeah, maybe they would take that. Let's see if Matias can last the whole season. Brilliant. Thank you very much, George. That's Juventude. Now let's look at a team who are aiming for their first ever season in the Brasileirão, George. Mirassol, who, as you mentioned, we have looked at before in the promotion and the newly promoted sides episode. I think some stuff has changed for them since then, Mirassol. So I mentioned there that one of the clubs we're looking at has already changed the manager, and that is Mirassol. Mr. Eduardo Barroca, who I think was quite inexperienced. I think he was relatively young, wasn't he? Either way, he's been sacked, George. He's gone already. So he didn't even make the start of the season, which is a bit cruel, really.
Really, it is.
But we've seen it before. Thiago Carpini was a good example. I think he got 1 game or 2 games, didn't he, at Sao Paulo? But that was on the back of a poor kind of. I mean, we'd call it a pre-season. It's a bit more tasty than that in Brazil, isn't it? But it is, to all intents and purposes, a pre-season. Either way, Barroca has gone, and there is pretty good reason for that. They did start the Paulista well, so obviously, as we know, they're not directly in Sao Paulo. They are from just outside, but they do compete in the Paulista. There's some great teams in that competition, George. Palmeiras, Corinthians, Bragantino even are, going to cause some problems as well. I mean, there's all sorts of trouble for them around every corner, really. And they did okay. They started pretty well, I think, against Santos as well. I think they beat Santos. No, they didn't. They lost to Santos, but they kind of slowly were picking up results against the smaller sides in there. Then they started to meet the bigger boys, Sao Paulo as well, obviously. And they actually lost six of the last 7 games and drew the other one. So there's 12 games in the table. They won the first 6, amazingly. Sorry, they lost the first one. They won the next 5. But then we just went on a terrible run, and that cost Barroca his job, it seems. So they haven't actually got a permanent manager yet, which, 2 weeks out from the start of the season, they probably will get one. But it's not a good way to go into your first ever campaign as a top division team. So at the moment, there's a chap called Ivan Baitello is in interim charge, and Paulinho as well. There's a guy called Paulinho, and I'm trying to work out whether it's the Paulinho of Spurs and Barcelona. I'm not sure if it is, to be honest. I don't think it is, but it could be, because there's all sorts of Paulinhos around.
Yeah.
So let me just see if I can kind of clear that up, because it would be interesting if it is him. Yes, it is him, George. That's amazing. Yeah. So Paulinho, ex Corinthians, ex Tottenham, ex Barcelona, ex Brazil international, very storied Brazil international actually. Is the I think he must be the sporting director by the looks of it.
Oh, right.
Which is pretty good. I should have checked that out just before I came on. But yeah, he's a new role, technical coordinator, which is basically sporting director. Yeah. So that's one reason to keep an eye on them. I guess maybe that's why they've done it, raised the profile of the club a little bit. He's Corinthians legend. I think he's probably from Sao Paulo, to be fair.
He is from Sao Paulo, yeah.
So maybe a localish club for him. I mean, yeah, he's apparently helping a great deal. Baitello just to see him through this period, and then they'll pick the manager. I don't know who they'll get. I mean, it'll likely be a person that we haven't heard of, George, but it might be somebody who we do know. But again, that's not the best way to go into your first season. And for Paulinho as his first job as a technical coordinator, as they call it, it's not a great way to go into it. But he's brought in Clayson, as we spoke about on the other show, who's going to have to be important really to them if they're going to get goals. I mean, in fairness, George, he hasn't got a goal yet. He's played 12. He played all 12 of their Paulista games. He hasn't scored. That's, again, not another good omen, really, when he's going to be the man who they're probably relying on a little bit to score. There's a chap called Gabriel who's been scoring a few. He's got 4 goals, 35-year-old who's been there for a few years, but he's a midfielder. So, again, with Juventude, with any of the promoted teams, really, it's all about, can you get the goals to keep you up? And we keep banging on about Alejandro last year, but he was so key for Vitória. And can you get that player? I think another problem for them is that, as we spoke about before, they lost their top scorer from last year, Della Torre, who's actually gone to Curitiba in the second division and has started really well there. So, yeah, you kind of question the wisdom of letting him go on a free transfer. They actually lost the second top scorer as well for last season, Fernandinho, who's gone to Ceará, so a top division rival. So, it's all a bit kind of worrying, I would say, from a kind of Mirassol point of view. They haven't done an awful lot more business. They did bring in a chap the other day called Rafael Silva, who was from Cruzeiro, but he wasn't really doing a lot of Cruzeiro last year. He's been away in China for a bit, actually, interestingly, and Korea and Japan. So he's played all over the place. He's been in Switzerland for a bit, actually, in the past. So he's maybe one to keep an eye on, Rafael Silva. He's only just signed for them. He's played once. So he's arrived for an undisclosed fee. So one to watch in terms of players out. Diego Gonçalves looks like the only player who's gone out to Criciúma, but couldn't tell you anything about him. So, yeah. And from my point of view, probably about the worst way that you could start a season is not having a manager. and having lost top scorers, brought in strikers who aren't scoring. So Rafael Silva for me is the one to keep an eye on in terms of Mirassol. He's the one who's going to get the goals if they're going to get goals. So I don't know what your reaction is to all of that, George, and where do you think they're going to finish as a result of that kind of circus, really?
Well, you mentioned one word, James, in there, and that's worrying, and it's exactly that, isn't it? 2 weeks out from the season, you haven't got a manager. He's been sacked. You know, you've barely got a guy scoring any goals. You've lost both your top scorers who got you promoted. What are you going to do? And you know, the lad you mentioned there, he might be the one they hang the hat on to get the goals. The very interesting about Paulinho going there. I mean, he might have to dust off his boots, James, and he's only 36. He's not that old for the Brazil hours. We know. He might have to dust off his boots and give them a bit of magic because, for me. Yeah, there's one way they're going, and it's down, James. And I'm sorry to say, it's bottom of the table. I'm not going to mince my words or mess about with that one. It's going to be rock bottom, and I think they're going straight back down, and they've really not helped themselves with any kind of preparation there. I know the Police, it's a very difficult, league to go in. There's lots of heavyweight teams in there, and like you said, they did well, but the teams that they came up against first off were obviously lower division sides. As soon as you hit the big boys, you start to lose games. And to be fair, they only just got beat by Palmeiras, didn't they? A couple of weeks ago, back end of February, it was 3-2. They needed an 86-minute goal, did Palmeiras, to win the game. But they also lost Corinthians in the last game as well. That's a difficult thing to go in. Obviously, Bragantino are in there as well. It's difficult division, that one, but it's a terrible way to start the league. It's interesting to see who they come up and get in as their manager. But they're going one way for me, James, and it's rock bottom. It's relegation.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be too many arguing with that, really. And again, the fans will probably realistically expect something similar. They'll expect, obviously, the team to put in the top effort and to pick up 1 or 2 wins and disrupt a couple of big teams maybe here and there. But I think most of them are probably expecting their first ever season. It's important to reiterate in the top division, it is probably likely to end in relegation. But again, you can go into it in certain shape, and this is a really bad shape to go into it, I would say. But maybe they'll surprise us, George. I hope that Rafael Silva can do something because he's had an interesting career there, and maybe he's one of those who just kind of springs to life when you don't expect. He's 32. He's not really ancient. So let's see. Anyway, that's 2 down, George. 2 more to go. Let's take a break and listen to the Toy Brazil Ball Band for a minute or 2 before we come back, and then we'll talk about Palmeiras, who are hoping to avenge their second place finish last year, and Santos, who have had a bit of a time of it this winter.
Mirassol, the Palmeries, Santos. Let's see how they get on the season in Serie A.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to our another preview show. Before the break, we looked at Juventude and Mirassol, and now, George, we're going to get into some Palmeiras, the palm trees, as that Toy Brazil Ball band shouted. He only shouted it once, though, and I don't really know why, but
I don't know. You'd have to ask him, wouldn't you? But I suppose the palm trees are their nickname, aren't they? So. Obviously might have been thinking that kind of way. But, let's talk about Palmeiras, James, and how we expect they might do and everything like that. Obviously, we've already mentioned them at the top of the show, with the quiz being around, the palm trees. like you said, obviously Abel Ferreira will be looking to avenge Fogo and win the title. And they've had some real big success. Obviously, they were gunning for a hat trick of Serie A titles last season. It wasn't to be. They missed out by 6 points in the end to Fogo. And we've mentioned that massive game to open the season with, in a couple of weeks' time, Palmeiras host they host Fogo, don't they? Before that, they're also in the Paulista. We mentioned the Paulista. They're in the final, James, a two-legged affair with Corinthians. The first leg is this coming Sunday, and then it is. They've got to surely they have to rearrange this, because it's got down on here that they play on the Friday, the 28th of March, and then they play on the Saturday in the open season on the Saturday, it says. So I think that's wrong. I think that will be rearranged. But yeah, as we speak about Palmeiras, Abel Ferreira, outspoken, like we know, James. I think we both sort of, mused that I think he had lost a little bit of his cool at various different stages in the season, and it wasn't a surprise to either of us, I don't think, when they didn't end up winning the league. And I think they've really splashed the cash as well in an effort to arrest that run, and arrest that run of that poor season last time. And the only one you've really got to speak about here, James, is that man behind me, Vitor Roque, who he's come for an absolutely outlandish fee, in my opinion, and it's something that he hasn't really warranted at all. But they've spent, I think, 25.5 million euros on him, which is an incredible amount of money to spend on a lad who's just turned 20 at the back end of February. And he's barely scored. I feel a little bit sorry for Vitor Roque here, but there was a lot of pressure on him, a lot of expectation, similar to that of Esteban Willian. But he broke into the Brazilian side. He got a Brazilian cap in a friendly game, and then he came with big expectations from PR last January of 2024 to Barcelona. He only scored 2 goals, James, in his time there. Was shipped off in the summer on loan to Real Betis. He got 4 goals in La Liga this season, 7 in all, a few in the cup competitions, including one against his parent club, Barcelona. They absolutely smashed them in a Copa del Rey game, 5-1. He was obviously allowed to play. He scored a bit of a consolation goal in that one. And now he's rocked up at Palmeiras, and I think they're going to hang their hat on him, to be quite honest. Obviously, Esteban will be leaving them in the summer to finally join Chelsea. That transfer seems like it's gone on for a heck of a long time. So he's one that they'll definitely look at. We've mentioned before, didn't we, James, the likes of Paulinho that have come in, and Facundo Torres from Orlando, who might weigh in with goals as well. I think since we chatted about them before, there's Bruno Fuchs, who's coming on loan. He's coming from on loan. From my team, Garlo. A couple of weeks ago, he's a centre back, and there's the lad Mikel from Houston in America. He's also a centre back, so he might partner the man Fuchs in the middle of the defence. But yeah, overall, I'm not really sure how they're sort of shaping up. They've lost not many of the real sort of stalwarts of the team last season. I know Victor Rice has gone to Man City, and he's yet to make a Premier League appearance, isn't he, for them? So you've got to ask. That might be one for the future, but you know what Man City are like. They do tend to take players and then they never bother playing them. So in terms of that, other than Ronnie, who was a bit part player for them as well, the man with the pig mask, he's gone to Gallo as well. They've not really lost many players, and I don't think, again, I think Abel Ferreira, I'm going to make it a prediction here, James. I don't think Abel Ferreira will see out the season. And I think they've just run a course. They've just hit a wall for me. And I don't think Estebao's massive. Leaving them is going to be very interesting to see how they cope with that, how Ferreira copes with that in terms of his media appearances, because we know last season he was very outspoken at times, and I think the pressure did really get to him, and he was probably throwing his toys out the pram a little bit because he was so used to winning, so used to winning titles and being up at the top and winning, and didn't go well for them in the cup competitions either. So whether they look to throw weight on those this time, I don't know. But Victor Roque is definitely the headline. He's an interesting pickup from Barcelona, really. I don't know your thoughts on it, James, and how you see them going.
I think they'll be all right, to be honest. I think Vitor Rice was, you're slating him a bit there, but, he's never going to throw him in straight away at City, having signed him in January. He's only 19. I think he's obviously a very talented player. We spoke a lot about him. I think he'll be fine at City in the long run. But obviously that big fee that City paid for him allowed them to go out and spend that money. And they have spent pretty heavily, really, when you look at, I think I saw a graphic today, they're by far and away the top spenders in this Brazilian winter by an absolute mile. So that's a clear signal that they need to do better, that I think they are hoping to do better. And like you said, it's probably a bit of a kind of Hail Mary for Abel Ferreira. It's go on then, we'll back you. And if you can't deliver, then you'll probably be gone quite soon, really. So if things don't start well, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go as well. But I think they'll be all right, to be honest. You look at the forwards, there's lots of firepower. Felipe Anderson's there, we forget. It's his first full season in Brazil. Torres I really like. I think he's a really good player, actually, for Facundo Torres. Paulinho, again, I know he had a poor season last year, but he's proven the year before that he can be a really consistent goal scorer in this division. Jose Lopez as well had a really good year last year up top. And then, of course, you've got Estevão for a little bit of the season too. And Roque, I don't know. He's got a point to prove. I saw him talking quite a lot when he joined about how joining from Betis, you're not challenging for anything, and coming to Palmeiras, how you're challenging for league titles and stuff. Obviously, he wasn't at Betis permanently, but I thought it was a bit unnecessary. No need for a dig at Betis. They've given him a chance to play regularly in Spain, and didn't think there was a need. I think he's trying to talk Palmeiras up, but it's like, well, you went to a club where you could have been winning things in Europe, and you couldn't handle it, you couldn't hack it. He became a real pariah for Barcelona. I think the fans it was a bit unfair. He was only a teenager at the time, and I think they just pinned all the hopes on him. Real got Endrick, and Barca got Vitor Roque, and Endrick hasn't really caught fire as well. But the difference is, I think Madrid are in a place where they can afford to carry a bit of a passenger like that, and Barca couldn't at the time. So, yeah, I think he'll do well. I think he's obviously done well in the past in the league. He wasn't ever like a mega prolific scorer, but he did all right for PR, and he's obviously a couple of years older. He's had that experience in Europe. I think it could go either way. I think it could be when we look back and say that was the game changer. That's the one where Palmeiras really pulled themselves back up, or we can look and say flipping it, a really expensive flop. So we'll have to just see how he starts, really. But I would say they've got enough firepower there throughout the team. I just wanted to point out as well, George, we talk about Vitor Rice going, they already seem to have replaced him, actually. They've got a young guy coming through who's started in 4 games of the Paulista. He's played 6 overall, called Luis Benedetti. And he's a Brazilian centre-back, young guy, 18 years old. And he, they do have this production line. And I'd suggest maybe he's one coming through. We knew that KK Naves, remember last season, with Vitor Rice, a very young partnership, did pretty well. Like you said, they brought in that Michael, who seems to be playing as well, and Fuchs on loan. But, yeah, Luis Benedetti, maybe he's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, well, this is it. Like you said, James, some of them come up and, it's always great to see these, young Brazilian lads coming up through there, the Brasileirão doing well, and then going on to Europe potentially, making a big name for themselves. Obviously, see how he gets on, but like of Vitor Roque didn't really work out in Europe, obviously, but like I said, it was a little bit unfair. They did hang a lot on him at Barcelona. Like I said, it was a time where Endrick went, and from Palmeiras, of course, but I'm kind of excited to see how he gets on. I think he will do well. And, as well, interestingly, when Estevão goes, those two together seem quite an exciting kind of part of the forward line, don't they? But when he goes, how will Vitor Roque take on the mantle of probably being the main man. Like I said, they have spent heavily. They'd spend a lot of money on Paulinho as well. And you know my thoughts on him as well, James. But like you said, one bad season don't make him a bad player. And, let's see. But for me, I don't know. I mean, by sort of elimination, really, James, I've got them down in 5th, haven't I now? Because but that's quite a bold prediction. But maybe they're just on the way out a little bit. Like I said, a little bit of a transition period. Maybe I think Abel Ferreira. I don't think he'll see the season out, and I don't know really. I like to see them bring in, like you mentioned, that fella there, young players. They seem to do it quite well. All of them do, but I think Palmeiras, you sit up and take notice a little bit of the ones that come up at the top end of the division, don't you? And they're obviously going to be fighting towards the top. But I don't think they'll have as good a season as they did last time. And obviously, I don't think they'll win it.
Yeah, maybe they're due a bit of a drop from the top kind of 2 or 3. Let's wait and see. All depends how that front line clicks and whether they can survive without Estevao. All right, George, let's move on. Let's move on to the last club who we have already looked at, like we said a few weeks ago now, Santos. So it's great to have Santos back. I mean, our first season in talking Brazil ball coincided with their first ever season outside of the top flight. So that wasn't great timing, but they're back under Pedro Caixinha, who, as we know, was kind of struggling with RBB back in the last season. He's got a bigger job now, really back in the top division, not long out of a job, and they've started pretty well. It has to be said in the Paulista, they were knocked out in the semi-final just this last week against Corinthians, which I said to you, didn't I, was a game which was surprisingly had Ramon Diaz's job on the line apparently. But they managed to win that. There was a couple of red cards for Santos, but a semi-final. I mean, see, Santos is a big club, isn't it, George? They'll expect to be in and around those final positions in the Paulista, but it's still a good sign for them under a new manager back in the top division for the first time in 2 years, that they're able to still kind of mix it with them. I mean, they lost to Corinthians, but 2-1, 2 red cards, it can happen, can't it? Obviously, the story of the season in the whole of the division is Neymar, who's behind me there, and obviously back in the Brazil squad, he has, George, quite predictably picked up an injury already. He's got a thigh problem, so it remains to be seen how long that keeps him out for. He's actually started really well for them in the Paulista. He's got 3 goals, 3 assists in 7 games. I mean, that's a pretty good start by anybody's standards. So, yeah, it's all about keeping him fit. Obviously, we know that he's looking for a move back to Europe in the summer. So, again, that probably is fitness dependent, but he's only here for a short time as things kind of stand. But I think away from Neymar, obviously he's a headline guy, but they've also recruited pretty well. I mean, again, we talk about Palmeiras spending big. They've spent 11 million euros, George, on Benjamin Rollheiser, who's an Argentinian guy coming from Benfica. First time in Brazilian football. He's been at River Plate, came through at River Plate, played for Estudiantes, then Benfica. Didn't do a lot, but he's a left winger, so somebody exciting. You spend that kind of money, it's a big fee to come in. They've also got David Washington on loan from Chelsea, who's a real good signing for them. He was a real star back when he first broke through at Santos in 2023. I think the season before we started, he was the one, like the young guy to watch. I didn't think he did an awful lot, but he was always seemed to be the one they pinned the hopes on Santos when they went down, I think. But he went to Chelsea, one of these. He's played a couple of games for Chelsea, which I didn't realise, actually. And now he's back at Santos on loan. So, a striker can get a goal. I think he'll obviously learn a lot from playing from the likes of Neymar. And Tiquinho Suarez, who we spoke about, who's come in, George, and actually hit the ground running, scored 5 goals already. I think he's an important signing. Experienced, obviously Lee, a double winner last year with Botafogo. I think he's another good signing on a free transfer. And then another exciting forward signing is Gabriel Veron, who did well at Cruzeiro, if you remember, last year on loan from Porto. And Porto have chosen to loan him out again to Brazil. So he's joined as well at Santos. And you wonder where all these attacking players can fit in, really. They've also got Tassiano from Bahia, who had a good year as well. So they've got they've got firepower, George, and that's, again, we talk about these promoted teams, and maybe you can't put Santos in that category, but they're still going to be, the first season back for a couple of years. They're still going to have to prove themselves all over again, and they've got players in there who can get goals, can't they? Soteldo is back on loan from his loan at Gremio as well, and actually the guy who I've never heard of, called Guilherme Augusto, has been the real star of the show in the Paulista. He's got 10 goals. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. So they do have goals, and there's quality in other areas of the field as well. So, you just have to, I think we have to look up the table rather than down it when you're speaking about Santos this year.
Yeah, 100%, James. Like you said, they are, by rights, the promoted side. They won the league. Not by that much in the end, I don't think. But look, the weight of Santos, the pure, the largeness of the club has obviously helped them bring in such talented players. Like you said, obviously the main man is Neymar. Predictably, he's got an injury, like you said, but he started well and he's doing all right. They've recruited incredibly well for the division, and they've looked towards the higher end of it. There's also, like you mentioned, Ticano as well from Bahia. Like I like Sotaldo from Gremio. I thought he had a decent season last time. I didn't realise actually that he was only on loan actually from Santos. So that's a really good player to come back in, and looks like he's obviously wanting to start and play with them this time around. Also, there's Alvaro Barrio he's on loan from Cincinnati in America, James. We did speak about him last season on the pod. He scored a lovely goal for Cruzeiro, won one of our awards, our weekly awards. He was nominated for a Puskás Award, I think a couple of years ago, for a goal he scored when playing for Cincinnati. But he's on loan, for the season at Santos, an Argentine forward player as well. David Washington obviously was never going to get in at Chelsea. Chelsea have loads of players like this, don't they? Who just are never going to ever play. A lot of them do seem to be Brazilian as well. So that's a good pickup again. So I'm excited to see how they get on. Obviously, like you said, Neymar is the main attraction for a lot of people, but they have spent big and recruited it extremely well for a promoted side anyway. And I definitely think you've got to look up rather than down. I don't think they'll be anywhere near the relegation. Obviously, Kashina, very much experienced as well, very experienced coach. Obviously, didn't do so well with RB last season, but maybe that was just his time to bow out of that, bow out of that club. He'd been there for going on a couple of years, hadn't he? So probably just the cycle had come to an end. But he's a very experienced coach, and I think he'll do quite well as well. So I'm predicting good things for Santos. I'm looking forward to covering them, actually.
Yeah, me too. And they start away at Vasco, which feels like a very historic kind of Brazilian football game. And obviously, if Neymar can make it back fit, and I don't know, I think the suggestion at the minute is that he probably will. It seems like he's expected to link up with the national team over the next week, but we'll wait and see on that. But if he does make it back fit, he'll be facing his old pal Phil Coutinho. So they are, came through the youth teams together in Brazil, and not at club level, but it playing together in the underage sides, and they are very good friends. So that'll be nice to see. Where are you predicting them to finish, George? I have to say you've not left yourself a lot of wiggle room, but I will allow you to change one if you want to. You can change whatever you like up until it kicks off.
Yeah, well, I was thinking I might have to, because I don't know. I can't fully remember where I put some of the sides, to be fair. But look, like I said, Neymar looking for a club, though, maybe in the summer. He's here for a good time, not a long time, as they say, isn't he? But I think like that game with Vasco on the opening night is a bit of a mouthwater, really, when you look at the two lads in the limelight there, Coutinho as well. Though I don't know when Coutinho's loan ends. Actually, I think it might be potentially in the summertime. Actually, I don't know, but who knows? But he might. I think he's still there currently, isn't he? But that's potentially a mouth-watering clash between the two of them, the two teams. But I think I'm going to go with. Have I got? I think I've put 10th. Somebody in 10th, haven't I, James, already? But
you've got Fortaleza in 10th. You've got Bahia in 11th. You've got Gremio in 12th. The next available slot is 13th. That's the highest spot left.
You know what? I think 13th sounds about right. To be fair, there might be a little bit above that actually, but I'm going to go with 13 because, yeah, they're a promoted side at the end of the day. Still, I know they do seem to have a lot more quality than the other 3 promoted sides, definitely. But I think they'll be able to mix it with a lot of the bigger sides also. But whether that translates to results, who knows? It could all go wrong for Neymar. He might not make it back out on the pitch. We've seen that before. He makes a headline move and he barely makes an appearance. So, yeah, it could go badly wrong for him also.
Yeah, I think they've got enough quality to see him through. I think 13. Hard to say whether they'll be happy with that or not. I think, given the way last season ended for them in the Brasileirão, you'd probably say yes, but with Neymar back and everything, no matter how long he's there for, they'll probably want to push on. I just want to point out, George, that actually earlier you put Juventude in 17th and said they'll stay up. That will not keep them up, of course. 4 teams go down, so that would see them relegated. I don't think you want to revise that at all.
Yeah, sorry, I was thinking about the English, the English pyramid for obviously when I made that prediction. I'm going to go with 16th then for them, James. Yeah. I don't think they'll get relegated, no. I think, like I said, they'll be very on the edge of it, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, fair enough. So that means, of course, that at least you're predicting at least one of the non-promoted teams to go down. So that will be, George, there's still there's 2 spots open for the relegation. So 2 of these 4 teams, I mean, you can tell which 2 really, you are predicting to go down. One of them you're predicting a really poor season for, actually, which would be a shock to the system, I think, for this club. But that's the end of these 4 teams. So the next 4 that we are looking at, George, as you rightly point out, is our final episode before the season starts. So the next 4 are Sao Paulo. I mean, they're finishing either relegation or just above it, according to you. Sport Recife, of course, newly promoted, Vasco da Gama and Vitória. So I think I know which 2 you're going to back for relegation there, but the listeners, you'll have to wait and see for next week before we find that out. Which teams do you want to take, George?
Well, before I decide, James, I would probably have to change 1 or 2 of my predictions. Definitely probably for Sao Paulo, to be fair. I think they'll have a good season, I reckon, but relatively decent, better than what I've looking like. I'm going to put them there, but yeah, I mean, we'll look at it next week. I think, I don't know, James. I mean, I know you like Vasco, don't you? I'll let you have Vasco if you like. I'll go with
Go on.
I'll go with. I think I'll go with Sao Paulo. I like Zubeldia, and I'll go with Vitória, James.
Oh, okay. So we'll do it that way. So, yeah, Sao Paulo, Vitória, I'll do Recife and Vasco. Fantastic. So that's it, George, and that's the penultimate show before the season gets underway. So it's been a bit of a slog, hasn't it, getting through all that and waiting for the season. It seems like a long time since it ended. Obviously, over 4 months. 3 months by the time we get to the start the campaign. I think your plans to do a watch along have been kind of blown up, haven't they? I think the fixture list was looking like it was all at the same time, but that's not happening, is it?
We know what the Brazilian league is like, James, and now they've split the opening day over the matter of 3 days, which is probably, disappointing for me, but you know what I mean, because I would have enjoyed to do that. But like I said, Palmeiras have got to turn around that final pretty quickly because they're playing the final of the Paulista, and then their opening game against Botafogo, a day after that. So
yeah, bit of a mad one. That I'm sure there'll be some kind of workaround on it that we haven't seen yet. I'm sure
there surely has to be, James, because and it will become next week where we will, I suppose, get into a little bit of routine of the and get and give out the fixture list for the for the round 1 of games, because it will be our like I said, this is the penultimate pod before the season starts. So next week, naturally, we would let the listeners know the full fixture list. But it does start on the Saturday now, Saturday, March the 29th, instead of all going on the Sunday. And I just actually seen that as you said that. So that is a shame.
I think it was always going to be that way. I think it was just when you're doing the Premier League, they pull the pictures out, and then close to the time, I don't think it was.
That's it. And I was kind of looking forward to doing a little bit of a watch along. So I enjoyed doing that on the final day. But maybe it just has to be, reserved for the final day. I don't know, really. It's probably the only day you can count on all of them playing at the same time, to be fair.
I think it's the only time they ever do, really, or in any league, really, think about Premier League or whatever.
I suppose you're right, any league in it, really, because, again, you look at Leeds this time, I think they all play on the final day at the same time as well. So it makes it fair, I suppose, in their eyes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. Okay, George. Well, that's it. That's us done for another week. Then here comes the music play. Have you got anything to say?
No, another good week, James. Another good pod. It's been a pleasure to talk to you as always, and I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Adieu.
Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time.
Bringing the passion from every town. Let the world be filled with love tonight. Sway to the beat, make you feel so right. Song by summer vibes, we're dancing in the heat. Go, go, go. Can't be beat up in Brazil, go spreading love in every way. In the sound of paradise, we're here to stay.